Welcome and good morning. My name is Rachel Heller, and I'm the CEO at CHAPA. Thank you so much for joining us today. I am really excited for this meeting, and it is true that I say that every year. And that's because I really look forward to hearing from all of you who are doing the work in your communities throughout the state. This is vital to the work that CHAPA does and that we all do together through CHAPA. It is our regional meetings that plant the seeds for the policies and the programs that we advocate for. And from our regional meetings, we take it to a group of policy committees and coalitions that we manage or participate in. And I welcome all of you both to today's meeting, but also to continue the work through our policy committees and coalitions. Now, the reason I'm so excited about this year's meeting is that we are trying something new. We are live in Springfield and Boston, and we're on Zoom through every corner of the state. I am so proud of my amazing colleagues at CHAPA who came up with this idea, worked with many of you on the logistics, and we are working to pull off an engaging hybrid meeting. We hope to do a lot more of this in the future and potentially get to even more locations in person. And we hope that this format really gives all of us more ability to interact and to see the commonalities between the work that we're doing and where we live, and to see the different needs in our regions of the state as well. Now, before we get into the details of our meeting, I'd like to thank all of our partners who provide us with the financial support to do this important work. And a special thank you to our sponsor, Bank of America, for supporting our regional meetings. Bank of America has been a longtime standing funder of these convenings. I also want to thank our co-sponsors for helping to shape this meeting and to do outreach to bring us all together. Today's meeting goes far beyond just CHAPA staff. Many of you are volunteers today, helping to take notes, run breakout groups, and we really appreciate that so much. As I mentioned earlier, and I'll get into it a little bit more, the importance of these meetings. So our regional meetings are very important to our work and to the policies and programs that we advocate for. CHAPA is a statewide affordable housing organization working for solutions that meet the needs of people in every region of our state. For more than 55 years, we've been advocating for opportunity at the local, state, and federal levels. We've been expanding access to housing through our coordination of the Massachusetts Homeownership Collaborative, monitoring thousands of affordable homes across the state, and administering the My Mass Home homeownership website. And we work to develop the field, the affordable housing and community development field, through trainings and forums. CHAPA brings together a very broad group of stakeholders that represent nonprofit and for-profit developers, housing authorities, tenants, legal services, real estate attorneys, financial institutions, municipal officials, planners, homelessness advocacy groups, disability advocates, service providers, community-based organizations, and more. And it's important that all of these different viewpoints are part of these conversations and part of developing the proposals, the policies, the programs that will enable all of us to meet the needs of people with extremely low incomes, low incomes, moderate incomes, making sure that people have real choice and opportunities in where they live. And together, we have done so much. We are really accomplishing a lot. Together, we've advocated for multifamily zoning requirements that became law for communities served by the MBTA. We now have almost 80 communities putting multifamily zoning in place. We all know in this meeting that zoning is crucial to affordable housing development. After all, you can't build what's not allowed. And it's from our regional meetings that our original policy proposal is what we advocated for, and that's for multifamily housing in every community in the state. And we will continue to work for that so that it is for those served by the MBTA and really everywhere. In addition to that, which is a pretty big deal and being implemented right now, to get local policies adopted that support affordable housing production and preservation, our municipal engagement team has worked with many of you in communities across the state to build coalitions in support of affordable housing. And not only have we been working in this way with communities very intensively and through a range of approaches, but we've also been able to launch the Our Massachusetts Homes for a Thriving Commonwealth campaign And this campaign is bringing together multiple sectors to grow the group of people advocating for the 200,000 homes we need across income levels throughout the state. Now, that's not all. Together, we have accomplished so much more. We have worked to expand the Massachusetts Rental Voucher Program, a program that was once $24 million, is now almost $219 million. And that is in large part due to the advocacy that you are all doing with your legislators. The Alternative Housing Voucher Program is another program that has been very much a focus of our work, and with many of our partners working in disability advocacy. This program grew from a very small program to a program that can now be project-based, meaning that we can produce affordable, accessible housing rather than leaving it to chance for people with vouchers to find something that's affordable and meets their needs. We've successfully worked together to increase funding for public housing. Together, we help shape and advocate for the $5.1 billion housing bond bill that includes dozens of new laws, including creating a statewide Office of Fair Housing, allowing accessory dwelling units by right, and establishing a supportive housing pool fund to make it easier to create the 10,000 supportive housing units we need as part of that 200,000 homes goal. We are accomplishing so much together, and now is the moment for housing. We know that together we can build a better future for everyone in the Commonwealth. This is something that we have always done in Massachusetts, shaping the future that we want for ourselves. And the decisions that we make now will really determine, and this is at the state and local levels, what our future is. And we together can ensure that every person has a safe, healthy, affordable home in the community they choose. So today's meeting will help us to get a better understanding of what's happening in every region of the state. This will be a very interactive meeting. We will do some presentations, but we really want to hear from you. This is definitely an exchange of ideas. So for now, I'm going to turn it over to Whitney Demetrius, CHAPA's Director of Fair Housing and Municipal Engagement. Whitney is going to run us through the agenda for the day. But before I turn it over to Whitney, I just want to ask that you all give her and our entire CHAPA team a big Zoom round of applause. I wish it were a thunderous round of applause in a room for all the work that they've put into this event, and to ensure that we have an interactive meeting that gives you meaningful opportunities to provide feedback and offer your ideas for solutions. Thank you again for joining us.
Thanks so much, Rachel. And thank you all for your rounds of applause and encouraging words in the chat. It is our pleasure to bring this together and to be in community with you all across the state for today's conversation. And as Rachel mentioned, this is really our opportunity to both share and thank you for the work that we've been able to do together, but also to listen and to hear from you all on ideas that you're grappling with and challenges to inform our work in the year to come. So a few housekeeping items I want to just share. Is that this session, of course, is being recorded. It will ultimately live on our events page at CHAPA for folks who want to view and share widely as well. Please be sure to mute your audio during the session. There will be opportunities for us to elevate and hear from everyone as well. We have over 400 people who've registered for this session. So we're really excited to be convening with so many of you all. And the PowerPoint presentations from today will be available as well, and will be going out to all registrants following today's call, as well as all of the highlights, all of what we've heard from you all, a summation of what we will hear from you all during our regional meeting, breakout rooms, as well as our surveys, several surveys that will be posing for you all. So please continue to introduce yourself and let us know where you're joining us from across the state in the chat. We love seeing all of the good mornings and hearing from where all across the state you're joining us from. So now, in an effort for us to convene here, where our team is in person in Greater Boston, the in-person session, and in Springfield, and we're all over, we pre-recorded our presentation for today, where we'll go over the work that we've been working on, both our policy team, with our fair housing work, our municipal engagement initiative work, and certainly our MBTA 3A zoning technical assistance as well. So we're excited to be able to share that presentation with you now. And then afterwards, we will come together and we want to really get a sense of who you are and where you all are coming from, questions you're grappling with. We'll have a poll that we will be convening, and then we'll have our breakout rooms where you'll have about 35 minutes to really get deeply into the conversation. So we will start that recording now of our presentation, and then we will convene with the agenda. Welcome. We're so excited to be convening our annual CHAPA Regional Forum, bringing together stakeholders across the state. This is our opportunity to hold listening sessions that really inform our policy and programmatic work throughout the year. We're excited to start off by sharing with us what we've been able to do, what we've been accomplishing and working on that really has been informed by these sessions we hold each year. So first off is to start off by saying thank you. Thank you for helping us to both frame and to advocate and to develop our framework. We certainly want to thank our partners who make this possible as well to fund our work. And certainly to our co-sponsors far and wide across the state who have ensured and helped to make this possible. They've been helping us coordinate and put together this amazing agenda that lies ahead. So thank you so much to each one of our co-hosts, some of which are in person today. So we have a hybrid session, excited to be joining virtually all together in this hybrid session this year. And so I want to talk a little bit next about our agenda. But first, a little bit about CHAPA. So our mission is to encourage the preservation and the production of affordable housing for low and moderate income families, and to foster diverse and sustainable communities through planning and through community and development. These sort of listening sessions are crucial to ensure that we do just that, so that we are informed as we advocate for opportunity, expand access to housing, and to develop the field. CHAPA started in the civil rights movement when there was so much happening, right, where community leaders came together and said, housing is crucial and important, and we want to put that at the forefront of our work. And certainly that is crucial today still. And so in our agenda today, we'll be talking about policy and budget updates. You'll be hearing from our policy team, and then we'll talk a little bit about our fair housing agenda, which we're really excited about in our MBTA communities. And then we will be reconvening. We'll be having breakout sessions. We'll do a poll because we want to hear from you. We want to know who is in the room. And then we'll come back together to convene, to share highlights, and to certainly share some upcoming events so that we can stay connected. You'll notice here on the screen, the poll. We'll be using pollev.com to be able to ask you questions because this helps us to inform and to hear from you. So we'll be doing that later on in the agenda. But next up, I am going to turn it over to our policy team so that we can hear about all of the amazing updates and the work that they have been up to. So I will turn it over to Matt and Jordan.
Good morning, everyone. I'm so glad to be here today. So glad to be talking with you. My name is Matt Noyce. I'm Director of Public Policy for CHAPA, and I'm really pleased to be joined by a new addition to CHAPA's team and to the policy team, Jordan Stockard. So I wanted to just take a moment, have Jordan introduce himself to you all. Jordan?
Hi, everyone. As Matt said, my name is Jordan Stocker. I am the new Senior Policy Associate with CHAPA. I will be working primarily on extremely low-income housing initiatives, staffing the Rental Assistance Committee meeting and the Public Housing Committee meetings, but I imagine there will be some overlap there as well with other policy initiatives. Before this role, I worked with the 10 independent living centers and the statewide independent living council on housing issues for folks with disabilities, building partnerships with housing authorities, advocating for accessible housing legislation, and looking to connect with local CDCs. I'm looking forward to chatting with you all more, but for now, I will turn it back over to Matt. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jordan. It's been great having him as part of the team and really looking forward to continuing our work, policy work moving forward into the next legislative session. So to start our presentation here, I want to walk through a little bit about the framework of how CHAPA does our policy work and what we're hoping to accomplish. So we all know that in Massachusetts, we have an extremely daunting set of challenges facing our housing market. We do not have nearly enough homes to meet the need of what our population needs. And so CHAPA has a bold plan moving forward, and our plan calls for the creation of 200,000 new homes over the next 10 years. Now, it's not enough just to have 200,000 McMansions. We need 200,000 homes across all income levels. So of the 200,000 homes, we need 20% or 40,000 of them to be affordable. That is, households who make 80% of the area median income and under should be able to afford them. Another 20,000 or 10% of those 200,000 need to be deeply affordable for those who are 30% of AMI and below. And that leaves 140,000 homes that are market rate. So how do we get there through public policy? So we have a framework, our 4 Ps that we look at to determine what our policy priorities are and how we're going to meet our goals. First and foremost, people, production, planning, and preservation. So let's dive a little bit more deeply into each one of those. People are the top priority for any number of obvious reasons. Our policies need to work for the people who will live in the homes. So people drive our work and our outcomes, and we really want to reach those end users. So you'll see here a list of policy priorities, and you'll see those in the other slides as well. And you'll recognize those in another couple slides as we look at some of the policy priorities we're looking at. So people is the first, and the next is production. We need to make the homes. We need to build the homes. We need to produce them so that people have a place to live. Next side is planning. We need to have the rules in place, the zoning in place that allows the homes to be built. So the funding for the homes are great, but if we don't have the rules in place on the ground to allow shovels to go into the ground, to have the construction take place, then the production can't happen. And last and not least is preservation. We cannot afford to lose a single home, particularly not a single affordable home. So we need to preserve the homes that we have. We need to make sure that they're healthy for the people who are living there. And only through focusing on all 4 of these Ps are we going to be able to get to the 200,000 homes we need. So next slide is our look back at the previous legislative session. Now, we're not quite done with the 23-24 legislative session, but we're just about, and we can start to make an assessment over where we are. And you see the pieces of legislation under each one of our 4 Ps. And now this is something remarkable that I've never experienced in my years working in public policy. And that is the number of check marks that you see next to these. Usually at the end of a legislative session, you have a slate of priorities and you look back and maybe you get 1 or 2 done. It's really hard to get a bill done. You look at this and look at these number of check marks we have, things that we accomplished during the session. I think all of us can take credit for that, for changing the political will and the political dynamics. So as we walk through these, we have created an Office of Fair Housing and established a Fair Housing Trust Fund in state government. We now have access to counsel and evictions that tenants facing eviction now have the opportunity to access an attorney to level the playing field in those proceedings. We have eviction record sealing that's being put in place so that if an individual has faced eviction, it does not carry with them for the rest of their lives. We passed a housing bond bill that includes $5.1 billion over the next 5 years in authorizations to create homes. We have a supportive housing pool fund to pair services with housing for those individuals who have experienced homelessness, who need services in order to maintain their housing. We now have accessory dwelling units by right in all single-family zoned areas in all municipalities across the state. We have protected the rights of tenants during public housing redevelopments, and we've established a Massachusetts Healthy Homes Initiative. That is a remarkable set of accomplishments to get done in one session. And that really shows not only the political will, but the scope of the challenges that we face, and that everyone in the legislature recognizes that we need to do more. So policy is one piece, but just as important is the state budget. And these are the dollars that are attached to the operating programs that provide housing and provide the services attached to housing. So you see here a chart of the legislative priorities, the budget priorities that CHAPA put forward in the fiscal year 2024 state budget. And so what we're seeing here, I'm sorry, this is fiscal 2025 state budget. I'll need to change that slide moving forward. So what we have here are the programs themselves. The first column, well, the third column is where the funding was allocated by the legislature in fiscal year 24. And then what we see is what the legislature allocated in fiscal year 25. And you see growth across a number of line items from year to year. Some of them, a very few number, were cuts. The legislature and the administration has indicated that they have ways to make sure that those programs will not be rolled back and that we'll see at least a maintenance of services. And you see some that are level funded. We need these dollars in order to provide the assistance that will keep people in their homes and allow them to access homes. So as we enter the fiscal year 26 budget cycle, we will continue to advocate for more dollars for all of these accounts, and we invite you to participate in that process. So looking ahead to the upcoming legislative session, which starts this January, there are a number of advocacy opportunities that you all can take part in through CHAPA. First and foremost is the implementation of the Affordable Homes Act. That included a lot of funding authorizations that we talked about, and also a lot of programmatic and policy items that will need to be implemented. We have the opportunity to file new bills for the upcoming session. When the legislature begins in January, they wipe the slate clean, and all the bills start over again. You saw all the bills that we accomplished last time. We have capacity to look to new policy opportunities to move during this upcoming legislative session. We also need to wrap up the legislative priorities that we did not accomplish during the last session. We'll carry those forward. They start back from the beginning, but we'll be continuing to advocate for those. We have the fiscal year 2026 budget process that is beginning really this month as state agencies are making their recommendations to the governor. And then it'll really get into high gear coming at the end of January, and the governor files her budget, and then the legislature takes it up. And then we also have the opportunity to provide input into the Qualified Allocation Plan, or the QAP. And this is the set of guidelines that the state uses to determine funding priorities. It's a little bit of a wonky term, but it is so important that we set the priorities and we provide the input into that so we can get the programs that we need funded. So with that, I'm really looking forward to hearing from all of you about the issues that you are seeing on the ground in your community, the challenges that you're facing, the successes that you've seen, because the input that you provide to us today will be so important as we look to policy priorities that we want to make sure encompass the needs of the entirety of the state. So looking forward to that. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Sade Ratliff, who's going to talk about fair housing. Sade?
Thank you, Matt, and hello, everyone. Lovely to see you all in this virtual space. See is in quotes. My name is Sade Ratliff, and I am both our municipal engagement and our Fair Housing Program Associate here at CHAPA, and I'm excited to walk you through some of the things that we've been able to accomplish over this past year. Starting with outlining what does fair housing work mean for us, and explaining to you all that this work is really driven through an equity framework, right? Understanding that fair housing is more than just a statute. Fair housing dictates that everyone has the right to choose where they want to live, free from discrimination. And that requires intentional work and intentional pushes, not just to build a collective mission, but to redress a lot of the harm that we're seeing in terms of fair housing discrimination. As Matt said, right, we don't do this work alone. And as Whitney mentioned, we do this work in many different areas, and that often requires us working with different agencies, such as our co-sponsors, or communicating with folks on the ground. And we'll get into the meat of what that means a little bit later, talking about some of the exciting legislation that Matt prefaced in his presentation, but then also talking about how we're in communities, interacting with people, and how they touch fair housing in their lives at every step. So from a regional standpoint to a state standpoint, and capitalizing on some of that federal energy. A lot of you guys have been doing this work for decades, and this work has existed for a very long time, but housing is hot right now, which I think is very important when we consider what is going to be on our legislative agenda, not just in the past year, but in upcoming years. So taking the fact that housing is number one in the minds of a lot of people, it's an issue that folks are really grappling with at this time, and making sure that our legislative agenda moving forward sort of frames the needs of the people from a fair housing lens. So that means zoning reform and creating an environment that is inclusive to build and produce that housing that Matt said we so desperately need in our Commonwealth. But also, dragging some of the things from our last legislative agenda that were successful, that we were able to get, and making sure that those programs not only are created, but that they're established and able to perform to the best of their abilities. So bringing in the establishment of the State Office of Fair Housing and ensuring that we fund the office to be able to be that string between agencies that allows us to expand our fair housing work and really educate those that are on the ground. So aside from our legislative agenda and the things that are to be done, I think it is really important that we acknowledge the wins that we've had. So getting again into the meat of that legislation that Matt prefaced for us a little bit earlier, talking about what it means to have a State Office of Fair Housing, an agency that is able to expand the work that you all have been doing for decades and decades, and sort of redressing the harms of federal policies that dictated who could and couldn't live in places, who had access to home ownership loans, and ensuring that our communities understand their civil rights and their civil liberties and know how to exercise them throughout their tenant and home ownership journeys. And that work can only be done if you put money where your mouth is, right? And that comes through the Fair Housing Trust Fund and us creating a budget that allows us to do more fair housing testing and find out where this discrimination is, for us to actually have ramifications to folks violating these fair housing laws. And I think a really big win for us this year has been our pushes for interagency collaboration. So convening smaller groups of people from different sectors to talk about the intersections of a bunch of different social issues and explain to their constituents, but also to state agencies, how fair housing does really touch a lot of the work that we do in terms of housing reform. And since we're talking about interagency collaboration, it's really important to talk about how we engage our stakeholders. Here at CHAPA, our next slide is going to explain how we mobilize people in our committee. So we have a committee that you all can join and that hundreds of you are already a part of, called our Fair Housing Committee, that meets and brings together stakeholders from all different parts of this issue, right? From the folks that are facing housing insecurity to the folks that are working every day through their jobs to be able to mitigate some of the discrimination that people experience. So we encourage you to join that committee, share with us the issues that your community is experiencing, and help us move this work forward. We also convene outside of our Fair Housing Committee, smaller subcommittee groups, and we have been able this year to bring folks into a room to talk about the intersections of environmental justice and fair housing, talk about what it might mean for us to envision a statewide affirmatively furthering fair housing law that protects us regardless of what the federal administration looks like, where and how money flows through federal budgets. And then again, underlining this point that has been super helpful for us in our work, the establishment of the the Office of Fair Housing at the state level. And I think it's really important, before I close, to talk about what you all can do in your own communities independently, but also with the agencies that you have here on this call. So revitalizing your local fair housing commissions is super important. We need people to be on the ground, giving people a fair housing 101, letting them know what their rights are and how they can exercise them. We also need your support in terms of contacting your local officials, letting people know that you are aware of your rights and you are very energized about the fact that you can exercise them, and sticking up for sort of your constituents and the people that live around you. And then lastly, just to underline, advocating for the new legislation that's coming out, capitalizing on the heat of the moment and being able to draw more people into the mission that we have here to furtherly advance fair housing. So I will now pass it over to Monica Keel, who will tell us how we can take sort of this action and this energy and match the moment in terms of our municipal engagement initiative. Monica?
Thank you so much, Sade. Hello, everyone. My name is Monica Keel. I am a program associate with the Municipal Engagement Initiative, and I just wanted to share some recent updates that our team has been up to since our last regional meeting in fall of last year. So from the beginning of this year, we have been working in a plethora of communities. So we've worked in our MEI Light capacity in Dennis and Weston earlier this year in February and in March, and have been doing some ongoing support with our full communities in Greater Newburyport and Needham. Our Greater Newburyport Coalition encompasses 5 communities: Amesbury, Newbury, Newburyport, Salisbury, and West Newbury. 3 out of those 5 have already passed their MBTA zones, so that has been a great accomplishment from this group. They've published ongoing articles in the Newburyport News. They have launched a website on the YWCA Greater Newburyport page, and we're happy to share that link in the chat of this meeting. Their legislative and project working groups have been extremely active with the Affordable Housing Trust and the city councils in Newburyport. And some accomplishments from our amazing coalition in Needham. You can see their pin and logos up here, but they had a really great MBTA campaign, which including walking tours, the picture of those buttons to support housing opportunities in Needham. They have a newsletter that goes out very frequently, and they also recently launched a website. We are also providing ongoing support to Franklin County through a separate contract we have with them and the Roxbury Collective for Affordable Housing. I just wanted to share, since I am going to be in person in Springfield as this meeting is occurring, there is a 3-county effort that was born out of support from the Franklin County Community Land Trust, that is the Valley Alliance for Land Equity, which encompasses Franklin, Hampton, and Hampshire counties. So if you are from those counties, big shout out to you, which was born out of a retreat that happened earlier this spring. Right now, our MEI applications are open and being reviewed to start launching some new coalitions in 2025. So some other ways to connect with us: I have office hours every Thursday afternoon and Friday morning, and you can use this Calendly link to schedule a time with me. If those times do not work for you, or you'd like to schedule a time outside of those times, you can send me a direct email to schedule an appointment, and I'm here to answer any questions you have about our program, affordable housing in general, or any application questions as that occurs. We have some free and ongoing open webinars. We have our Affordable Housing 101 session, confronting the history of housing discrimination, which Sade Ratliff talked about for a minute. And you can find all of that information on our events page. Thank you so much. And I will now pass to Lily.
Thank you, Monica. My name's Lily Link. I'm the MBTA Communities Engagement Senior Manager. I'm joined today by Will Radigan, who will introduce himself in just a moment. So I want to start, I'm sure that you all have been hearing about this a lot over the last few years, but for anyone who needs a refresher, the MBTA Communities Act, otherwise known as Section 3A, which was passed almost unanimously in 2020, requires that 177 communities that are either serviced by the MBTA or share a border with a community serviced by the MBTA have to create a zoning district where multifamily housing is legal by right, meaning that developers will not have to go through those arduous special permitting processes that drag out development and make it so much more expensive for folks who are looking to rent or buy those homes. So there are 4 communities, or 4 categories of communities with rolling deadlines. We are currently working with a lot of commuter rail and adjacent communities to support them in passing these districts before the end of the year. These districts must allow for 15 units per acre by right. They need to be a reasonable size, so you can't just say it's all going to be on one parcel. There cannot be age restrictions. You could build age-restricted housing within this district, but you can't say that only age-restricted housing can be built. And if you are one of those communities with a train station, a certain percentage of that district needs to be within a half mile of that train station. And so over the past 2 years, we have been supporting communities specifically with their community engagement efforts in passing these zoning districts at the local level, because each one of these 177 communities have to stand up and say, yes, we will abide by the law. So far, we've supported over 65 communities across the region in 3 main ways. We've had monthly community cohort meetings, so grouping communities together with other communities that share similar characteristics and meeting monthly for, learning, peer-to-peer sharing, troubleshooting, problem solving together. So we've had 7 cohorts meeting over the last 18 months. We also have monthly learning sessions where we dive into topics that are related to 3A, particularly around addressing common concerns that often rise when we're talking about creating more housing opportunities, things like water and sewer, school enrollment, facilitating difficult meetings. How do you handle things when they get a little bit out of control in some of these really contentious communities? And then lastly, providing direct one-on-one support to communities. So going in and presenting at meetings, giving them guidance on their community engagement strategy. We've developed a lot of technical and educational resources, including our 3A Resource Hub library, which has hundreds of one-pagers, research, articles, news articles, videos, et cetera, that folks can use in their own community engagement efforts. And so lastly, I just want to tell you a little bit about the progress that we've made so far, and then I'll hand it over to Will. As of last night, 78 communities, I'm saying that, I realize today is October 17th. So as of October 16th, 78 communities have approved their multifamily zoning districts. And 36 of those have received final approval from the state. So after a community passes their zoning district at the local level, they need to send off that package to the state and get the final thumbs up to make sure that their district is compliant. All the I's have been dotted and T's have been crossed. So 36 communities have reached that final threshold, and the other 40 or so are still in the process of being reviewed. At this point, no district has been passed and then rejected by the state. Unfortunately, we have had 15 communities vote it down, either through town meeting or city council. Some of those are bringing it back to this fall town meeting, while a few others are waiting to see the outcome of the Milton case. About 60 communities still have votes coming up just in the next month or so. So we hope very soon we'll have a number that's much higher than 78. But at this point, we're looking at about an 84% passage rate. And we are very proud to say that for communities that have participated in our technical assistance program, they have a 92% passage rate, which we feel like speaks to the value of community engagement and what a difference it makes when you really bring people along for the process. So with that, I want to hand it over to Will to talk a little bit about the Milton case.
Great. Thank you so much, Lily. My name is Will Radigan. I'm CHAPA's new MBTA Communities Engagement Manager, and it's really wonderful to be here with you all today. So if you followed any of the news about the MBTA Communities Act, all of the headlines recently have been about this court case in Milton, where the Attorney General is suing Milton for non-compliance with the law because they missed the deadline to comply at the end of last year. And right now, there's a lot of misinformation and misconceptions about what this lawsuit means and what the potential consequences could be. And that's actually leading a fair number of towns to delay taking action on this law until the court case is resolved. And we're really recommending against that for a few reasons. One is that we just do not know how long this court case will take. The results could come out in a few weeks, or they could take several months to be released. And if they are not released until next year, many communities are at risk of becoming non-compliant by the deadline at the end of this year. So let's review what this case is actually about and what some of the consequences could be. So the Attorney General is making two main arguments. One is that this law is mandatory. The law says communities shall create a multifamily district, and she is arguing that shall means shall. There is no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Communities must comply. She's also arguing that if they do not comply, she has the ability to enforce the law and impose additional penalties beyond the loss of grants that are specified in the law. Now, Milton is making two other arguments. The first one being that the guidelines that the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities released should have been released as regulations instead of guidelines, which is a more involved process. So they're arguing they don't need to comply with those guidelines. And they're also saying that the loss of state grant funding should be the only legal consequence for noncompliance, and the Attorney General shouldn't have further authority to enforce the law. So it's important to understand what could actually change based on this lawsuit and what is definitely staying the same. Now, what could change if the Attorney General wins, she could actually appoint what's called a special master to rezone communities that are non-compliant. And many communities are, if they're bothered by this law in any way, it's because they want to maintain control of their local zoning. Right now, the law as written gives them a lot of discretion on where to place their multifamily district. If the AG wins here and communities haven't complied, they could actually see the state compel a certain zoning district, which is what they're trying to avoid, which is another reason we're really encouraging compliance before the deadline. Another consequence is that the EOHLC could be forced to redo the guidelines and regulations. That could mean that the guidelines become a little less strict on the requirements, but it actually could mean they become more strict. It just means that they need to go through a more complex process with several public hearings to define the regulations. So some major changes that could happen there, but what definitely won't change is that this law will not be overturned. This law is going to remain on the books, and the requirement that all communities must create a multifamily district of reasonable size will remain. That size or where it goes could change a little bit, but the requirement is staying the same. And what also definitely won't change is that non-compliant communities will lose significant state grant funding. There's no chance that is going off the table. So that's where we stand with the court case. I want to move on now to how you can get involved and help get this law done in your community. So first thing, learn more about the law. As Lily said, we have a whole bunch of resources about this that we will share with you after this meeting. People have been writing about this ever since it's been passed. Second thing is to try to share the word about what this law means in your community. And one of the most important things you can do is show that this law could create the kind of housing that already exists in your community and isn't really scary for people. So we are encouraging folks to find parcels that already have 15 units per acre in their communities and show it to their neighbors, because these properties often look like traditional triple deckers, two families side by side, cottage courts, all these kind of housing types that people are already very comfortable with and aren't so concerned with. And next, start having conversations with key stakeholders, business owners, people that live in multifamily housing right now, people who might be struggling to afford living in your community, people who are older and looking to downsize but can't find those options. Find those perspectives, explain how this law could benefit them, and then maybe best case, get them to help join you in advocating for this law in your community. There are more ways you can help as well if we keep moving on. Get the word out in your community, write op-eds, let us to the editor. We have tons of talking points for you in this, so please reach out to us. We will equip you with everything you need to respond to common misconceptions. And then attend as many planning meetings as you can to make your support known for this law. Research has shown that people who attend planning meetings are often against housing, so we really need the voices of people that do support new housing and more affordable housing in their communities. Finally, many communities are holding town meetings this fall where people will have the opportunity to vote in favor of 3A. Find out when those meetings are and please vote if you have the ability. And as city councils, please speak before those votes happen. Finally, there are a lot of movements around the state already that are supporting this effort. And if you live in an MBTA community, reach out to us. We will get you connected with the folks who are already working on this. And if a group doesn't exist yet, we can help you get that group started. So finally, I will wrap up this section. Thanks so much for listening. And I'll pass it back to Whitney Demetrius, who will get us started on our regional breakout sessions.
Thanks so much, Will, and the entire team. You can see we've been up to a lot in this past year, and as Will shared, we will share resources. We will share this PowerPoint presentation following today's meeting, and certainly want to encourage you all, as my colleagues have shared, to engage with us, not just on today, but also in our various committee works and ongoing work throughout the year. So a few things. We want to, now that we've shared with you what we've been up to and who we are, growing team here, we want to know who you all are, what you're working on and what you're grappling with. And so we are going to be launching a poll. There is in person, for the folks in person, you will have a QR code you can scan and also a paper version of the same polls to be able to answer those questions. And for the folks here virtually, we will share a hyperlink in the chat on how to join the pollev.com poll. So we will be doing that in just a moment. And then following the poll, we're going to go into our regional breakout groups. You'll be able to self-select for a virtual breakout room to join the conversation around your housing challenges, concerns, things you're grappling with, and things that we might elevate. And so please be sure to follow the instructions we'll share in the chat to be able to join those pieces. So we'll stop recording here now. And all right, so I have shared in the chat the hyperlink for the poll, and I can see folks have already begun to complete. We want to know, where do you live or work? Please use the map to pin so we can get a sense of who is in the room. And I know our folks in person are either using their phones, computers, or the like, so I'll give you a moment to join us in the poll as well. But excited to see folks from all over. This is exactly the point. This is why we convene these sessions, so that we can bring together folks from across the state in one space together, right? So visually we can see we have folks from the Cape, the North Shore, Metro West, all over the state here represented. And so again, excited to see so many of you all here. If you are unable to complete the poll, feel free to pop it in the chat as well. So excited to see Betty here from Turner Falls. Great to have Montague represented. This is the whole point of being able to convene these sessions. So we'll go over to the next question here in just a moment. As soon as Monica's ready, we'll go over to the next question here. And we want to know which category best represents you. Which category? So we can see we have municipal staff and elected officials. Excited to have you all here. And many of you all are housing advocates and members of nonprofit staff. Many of you all are co-sponsors here for this convening. We have some who are housing technical assistance providers and motivated residents. We love to see that. Hopefully you see yourself as a housing advocate of some sort. We do have some that are others, but we're excited to see so many of you all represented here on the call, and excited to be hearing from you throughout the session. All right, so the next question we have is, what is the biggest issue you're dealing with right now in your housing work? The biggest issue you're dealing with right now in your housing work. And feel free, as questions come up, as topics come up, you can +1 them. And so it will indicate if, so we don't have to repeat, but I see NIMBYism, the need for housing subsidies, not enough housing, homelessness, lack of housing supply, foreclosure, cost of building. I see many +1s on cost of building and housing stock. Funding being an issue. I can see in the chat folks mentioning the lack of support for Black and Latinx home ownership, the cost of purchasing, construction cost again coming up. NIMBYism we're seeing high on the list. And we'll be again doing a summation of lots of what you guys are sharing with us here in our notes that we'll be sharing out. The biggest issue being the lack of housing opportunities. I see housing for individuals who are disabled, politics, costs. Appreciate all of that. As she scrolls down, just reading a few others, landlords raising rent, fear of displacement. Yeah, I see a few of those in different ways coming up. Lack of funding and land acquisitions. Again, construction costs and housing stock, increased cost of supplies and supply chain costs. The time it takes for things to get built, 5 years or so, that being a real barrier. This is great. Lack of protection for Section 8 house voucher holders, right? Okay, great, great. Please keep those things coming. These are important for us to be hearing from you all, what you are grappling with most in your various work. Yeah, fair housing. Great. Okay, so we'll go to the next question just based off time, but you'll still have opportunity to uplift on those questions as well. So our next question we wanted to ask, pose to you all, is what are the biggest gaps you are seeing? What are some of the biggest gaps? And some of those same trends from the previous question may carry over, but what are some of the biggest gaps? Funding gaps, missing middle housing, lack of direct service of unhoused individuals, delays in buildings being prolonged, affordable single-family housing for purchase. Biggest gaps being things being truly affordable housing. Please feel free to +1 on things and give it a thumbs up so we can see where there's indicator and higher trends. Again, missing middle, pre-development resources, fear of loss of private control or private property rights, fear by private property owners to rent private property, affordable home ownership, lack of funding for preservation. There's little attention to needs for rural communities and small communities. Definitely want to make sure we get into the weeds on some of that in your breakout rooms, please. Attention to lotteries as one of the biggest gaps, and available units, applicants for lotteries versus available units being a gap. Planning capacity in small towns. Elders and disabled accessible units now and in the future, competing with housing costs for immigrants and homelessness, and a need for balance for housing for all of us. More resources to promote housing stability. I think I saw a few things around gaps around resources and funding. State needs for funding, housing advocacy, market rate system serving only one market, median home system serving only one market, median home price to household income ratios being a gap. Okay, great, lots of gaps. Okay, this is really helpful for us because we're going to really be synthesizing a lot of what you're seeing that really hopefully will inform our work. We'll go to the next question here because we have a few, so please feel free to continue answering as you feel need, but based off time, we'll try to go through some of these here together. How are state and federal resources helping your community to address your housing needs? How are they helping? How are the state and federal resources helping your community to address your housing needs? Around new developments, it's helping slowly, providing funding for PSH projects and shelter. I see in the chat median income to qualify for affordable housing. Let's see, if we scroll down, I'll try to read a few more. Funding for development of new housing, AHBP, first-time home buyer, tax credit incentive, selectivity, focus on decarbonization and green building, HLC grants, supportive housing for new development, HLC grants for new development, minimal help for rural communities, so maybe an opportunity to increase their infrastructure improvements. NSP has helped in some communities. You can see in the chat, leaders interest and priority for housing. Okay, great. So it's good to see how some of the state and federal resources are helping to address. And I can see even within that, some mentioning some of the barriers, but we see planning grants and the need for cash, not bonding from Affordable Homes Act. Some lists are moving faster for low income families and individuals. Okay, great. So excited to see how some of the resources, both federal and state, are working to address some of your housing needs. So there's MBTA zoning, state funding for new projects. So this is great for us to see, especially in ways in which we can enhance and help to support and advocate what has been working. The next question, and thank you, Jordan, for putting the link in the chat again for folks to join in on the fun here with the poll. The next question, what are you doing locally that could be highlighted and replicated? We want to hear what you guys are working on locally, what things have been done locally that can be highlighted and replicated. So writing LTEs and op-eds, municipal voucher programs, Section 8 to home ownership, certainly something I'd love to see highlighted, replicated much more across the state. Local RA funds, 10% of affordable housing trust being accessible, inclusionary zoning, loans to build ADUs, first-time homebuyer assistance and rental assistance. I see raising awareness for the need of rent controls. All right, again, want to hear what you're working on locally and what can be highlighted and replicated. So sort of sharing a housing planner, a shared housing planner, a home share program for seniors to share living expenses, public-private partnerships, when we see that. Again, seeing that uplifted to build rental units affordable and that are affordable and attainable, first-time homebuyers assistance, developing housing on library sites. Please let us know where you are doing that. I love that example. I want to know where you are locally doing that. Neighborhood rebuilds, healthy homes work, using towns or LHA land for affordable housing development. I can see in the chat, implemented voluntary TA assistance program as part of supportive services to help people access tax benefits. Love seeing examples of that locally, making every effort to keep residents housed if they have heavy arrears. Zoning laws, changes related to short-term rentals. Who was working on senior home share program? We want to hear about that. So a couple times, heard that a couple times. Ella and myself would love to learn more about that. Note in the chat. The use of CPA funds for housing, a fantastic new PSH program for older adults, for housing reviews of proposed zoning laws. This is all great. Lots of things that we hope can be highlighted, replicated. Please mention them in your breakout sessions, because I would love to attribute that locally to where you are and who's doing these special programs and ideas, so that we can amplify them and so that it can be replicated. So on the next question, and please keep all of these ideas coming. We'll keep this poll live for a portion so we can continue to hear from you. What are the gaps you're seeing? Right, we talked about how these things are, the resources we're helping, but what are some of the gaps you're seeing in terms of state and federal resources right now? So there's a needs gap to really address the needs. There's a need for more funding for permanent supportive housing, money for MRVP, mass dreams. We need so much more. So much more. Great transfer fees allowed, tax breaks, funding assistance. Lots of you guys are moving in rapid speed. I'm trying to keep up, but keep them coming, and please +1 and do a thumbs up where you see things that are coming up that you can agree on, where we can see some of the trends. And again, we'll be working to synthesize this. Let's see, technical assistance for smaller towns, help for seniors, lower the cost of affordable housing production, tax credits for long-term affordable home ownership, enough MRVP, so more money to really meet the needs. I'm seeing that several times throughout the responses. Need for more assistance for infrastructure around wastewater primarily, and need to address issues in rural communities with town leaders, pre-development funding for architects, lawyers, consultants. Okay, great. Funding for healthy homes, smaller scale development, need for rapid rehousing programs. Okay, gaining priority status in extremely, I think that was extremely low income housing. Stronger state laws requiring multifamily or even just duplexes everywhere, not just MBTA communities. Point is heard there. Okay, great. Keep them coming. We want to know more of the gaps. Please address some of these things in your conversation during the breakout sessions as well. Again, thank you for all of these ideas and thoughts. We'll go to the next question. Okay, what steps have your community done to be in compliance with MBTA communities bylaws? Now, again, we understand that this question may not apply for everyone. Where are you currently at? You know, has your community adopted a multifamily zoning? And again, we understand that it may not be applicable to you as well. I'm so excited to have been able to share with you all some of what our communities we've worked with in MEI have done. In Needham, who just passed their zoning just yesterday, launching campaigns in support of it, having a website and their newsletter going out. So I can see here, based off the question, some folks have passed and they're really excited in their town meeting. They passed zoning in time before the December deadline. Somerville has adopted multifamily zoning, adopted zoning as required. So excited to see, I think we're close to a count of 82 communities that have passed thus far as of yesterday morning when I just got my count from the team here, but excited to see so many more. And Ipswich voted it down last night, but again, still opportunity to get it done. So we'll go to the next question. Okay, so how are you incorporating diversity, equity, and inclusion in your housing work? And how is it maybe happening locally? Interested to hear ideas and thoughts around this, and feel free to +1 on things you're seeing. Language access. Love when we are able to put that at the forefront to make sure folks are able to engage in the work. Language access, DEI committees, ensuring your program outreach are available in various languages, certainly of importance. Maybe there's a sense of not enough being done, and certainly looking for more assistance from CHAPA with help on this. We hope that we could be able to be a resource and be able to do just that. Supporting development fellowships. It's interesting. I want to know more about that. Try to get all of your clients to include diverse range of professionals in their development and in their work. So it's important to have leaders who do just that. So thank you for that. Let's see. A focus on municipal vouchers and rental assistance on immigrants not eligible for federal resources and families with kids in public schools through targeted outreach. Important, working with all people in culturally specific communities. Leaning on CHAPA to created Housing for All group to help us get the word out. Absolutely. Renting out to folks of different cultures. Important. It's important as housing providers that we play that role. Making noise, reminding those who make decisions, educating residents and tenants, writing lots of letters, supporting my friends as an ally who put up with lots of pressure. Working with advocates who are represented by the local government, both young and diverse groups. Okay, so keep all of those ideas coming. This is of utmost importance. We hope at CHAPA we can be a resource to help ensure this in all of your work, and love hearing about the ideas that we can elevate out to others as well. Offering applications in 5 languages, advertising open lotteries in various languages and locations, using a translation service as needed. So important. It's part of our duty to affirmatively further for housing and affirmative marketing strategies. Learning ways to insert it as a standard way of operating. Love that, love that. All right, so we'll go to the next question here. What barriers are you seeing on zoning and production that can be working to remove? What barriers are you seeing on zoning and production that we can be working to remove? For example, ADUs, state land, etc. What are some of the barriers? I see right away taxes as a barrier, large homes, state land. Stoneham decision put inclusionary zoning bylaws into play. ADU regulations are needed. I know folks are really looking to see what comes out of the new state mandate. Parking minimums, preserving character, in quotes. Let's see, lack of incentives for smaller developers and individuals. So other barriers they're seeing in zoning and production, special permits for multifamily development, funding for home ownership, taxes. I see that a few times. Historic preservations, R1 zoning, taxes. More NIMBYs are certainly a barrier. Exclusion of SROs and congregate housing, local regulations stricter than the states. How to rehouse that are folks that are displaced from development. Okay. All right, keep them coming. More ecological and cheaper building. Let's see the full frame, but hopefully I capture most of it. Requirements that are for gray water, like gray water. Right? ADU regulations, again, we're seeing support for manufactured home repair or replacement. Okay, great. So seeing lots of things that we can be addressing, that we can hopefully be tackling together. Tax credit not affordable for all. Okay, great. And keep the answers coming. We'll go to the next, just based off time. The next question we have is, what are you seeing rather for development costs? What are you seeing for development costs? We want to get a real sense of what folks are grappling with and challenged with locally in your work. What are you seeing? Things are skyrocketing. They're too high. On Nantucket, $700 per square foot, 400,000 plus per unit. Supply chain issues. I see in the chat outrageously high estimates of 600, 700K in Boston, 600K per unit. I see anywhere 300 to 800 per unit. Materials are very expensive. TDC is approaching 600K per unit for multifamily. Wow. Fees are high. Water connection and sewer connections, attributing to that. Loss of prime AG land is bad. On Nantucket, the costs are astronomical, I can imagine. In Boston, another thing noting 850K per unit. Okay, great. So this is important for us to kind of take note of what's happening. I see in Salem, 300 to 400 per unit being noted. Brownsfield. Okay, it costs the same to build in Boston as in the South Coast, but rents in South Coast can't be as high as in Boston. So yeah, it's interesting for us to know. Costs are super high. Okay. And then I see in the chat, new proposed lot, high cost of sewer, water, and need for practical costs on smaller lots, lack of repairs for Section 8, lack of elevators for current senior apartments. Materials are very expensive. Okay, so Nick, we'll go to the next question. We understand this really as a continued barrier each year, but wanted to get a sense of that. What are you hearing about rent increases? What are you hearing? I see some folks already have raised this issue up a few times, but what are you hearing? Folks looking for a need for rent control, affordable for who? I see a number of +1s on that, as well as the issue around rent control, that rent is going up and it's way too high, and that there's a need to address it. Lots of ideas around rent control that folks are hearing. Salaries are not comparable to where rents are going, but it's not affordable. There's big jumps, and it's still going up. Section 8 paying for their heating bills and not insulation, no insulation in Section 8 units. So that it's excessive, I'm seeing. What are you hearing about rent increases? There's a lack of inventory, means that landlords can increase, right, the rent, that is still going up. And it seems to be a common trend across the state as well, seeing some common trends here. Okay, cost of utilities and taxes are the reasons why rent are skyrocketing. Difficult, especially during this time for fixed income individuals. Okay, great. Let's see, higher rent under inferiority. Rent is being increased without it being oversight. Rent is too high. All right, so we'll go to the next question here. What are you seeing in the way of displacement? And also a few of you raised that up in other questions around barriers. But what are you seeing in the way of displacement? And if you could attribute to just where you're coming from in the conversation, that's helpful in the answer. So you may say people are getting priced out of the Cape, right? So just so that we have a sense of how some of these are also attributing to locally, that would be helpful. Lots of condo conversions and many seniors forced to move, more unhoused individuals, adults than ever before, especially seniors being displaced. Families renting rooms. I see some plus ones on that. I'm interested if others are seeing that, and so that we can kind of get a real sense of that as well. Elderly on fixed incomes, units moving to short term, young generation can't afford housing. I see a number of plus ones on that. The lower outer Cape, older adults on fixed income and younger people and families alike cannot keep up with rising costs. Out migration across the bridge. I've heard those conversations of folks having to be displaced across the bridge. Hedge funds gobbling up single family homes and taking them off the market. Towns not using surplus buildings, not for housing, example, schools, senior centers, town buildings, misplacements due to town using those buildings for their use. Families renting rooms, I'm seeing that again. People choosing to leave Massachusetts and purchase in other states, so being displaced out of the state, especially home buyers. Evictions for renters who complain about conditions and then there's no place to go. That's an interesting one, and I see a few plus ones on that. Interesting. On the Cape, 800 plus families earning less than 100,000 leaving each year. Seniors unable to age in place in Brockton in particular. Loss of nursing home beds conversions don't provide the same level of service and care. Elders being displaced, people being priced out based off foreclosures. I wonder if others are seeing that as well. Elders can't downsize. Lots of rooms being rented instead of apartments. Some are renting illegal rooms in basements and attics. Folks are priced out in the Lawrence area. Retaliation against tenant leaders. Direct message me, I need to hear more. I need to know what's going on with that. As a Needham resident, seniors unable to stay in community. Rent going up each year without explanation or warning. Too much money because of a raise. They can no longer qualify for subsidies and being displaced out of communities. Based off that, rent goes up each year without explanation or warning. Cultural displacement, I see in the chat. Cultural displacement. Big businesses buying up small housing stock, too much money because of a raise, being priced out. Okay, all so very alarming. Please keep these responses coming. And in some ways, some of this I want to pause because there's so much I want to dive more deeply into. Housing emergency repairs, causing displacement, repairs are needed. Please keep these responses coming, and as much as you can to contribute them directly so that there's spaces for us to follow up. It's going to be helpful for us, but we also hope you'll get into some of the meat of this during the breakout session. So the next question. What are you seeing for housing quality and rehab needs? I know some of this has come up in other spaces where in other questions around the gaps and the needs, but what are you seeing for quality and rehab needs? Of course, preservation is of utmost importance to us at CHAPA. We want to hear as well, and please continue to uplift the thumbs up if it applies. Huge need for rehabs. I want to hear rehabs needs are high. I see that again. We have a number of abandoned homes, existing housing stock that's aging housing stock, reluctant landlords to address needs, I'm imagining. It's very expensive to rehab and to do it accessibly. Corporate ownership of rental units displacing individuals. I wanted to uplift that. I saw in the chat. Delays in rehabs and new proposed housing in Northampton, not for accessible or seniors. No fair equity in housing. Have to live with poor quality to avoid rent increases. Lead paint being an issue. Existing housing stock needs money for emergency repairs. Yes, preservation is a huge need. Apartments, there's a real need for repairs. Rehab funds for seniors, no incentive for affordable home ownership to maintain the property, resources to maintain properties, not enough repair programs for low-income homeowners, incredibly expensive, which becomes a barrier for communities who want to invest in PSH and affordable housing. Older multifamily often is affected by this. I can see lots of plus ones on this question as well. Older multifamily being an issue several times throughout many of your comments. There's no state funding for low-income home ownership preservation, maybe a need for an increase there. There's rehab funding for seniors that's needed. Funding for that program ended 20 years ago. So real need for more resources and funding. Keep those responses coming. We will go to the next question. For now, for the interest of time, what policy solutions would you like to see CHAPA pursue? I know many of you all are working on various things. What policy solutions would you like to see CHAPA pursue? This is your moment. All right, this is what we said. We were here to hear from you. Rural and small small community programming, rent control. I see several plus ones on that. TOPA, local option for transfer fees, senior rent stabilization statewide, senior rent stabilization statewide, preservation funding, support transfer tax, TOPA, we're seeing a few times here uplifted, as well as rent control, affordable ADU funding. Let's see, local options for that, repair assistance for seniors, investments in affordable housing for individuals, TOPA and RAFT, more funding for that. Developer, you guys have you're going so fast. Lots of ideas I see in the chat. The HERO bill. It's helpful if when you cite things directly. It's helpful. Federal climate infrastructure funding, inclusionary zoning at the state level, pre-development funding. I'm seeing. Okay, CPA matching funds and an increase for funding there. Work with home care for units. Let's see, improvement of our continued support for access. And get that to council legislation, continue support for that. Okay. Deed restrictions, an understanding to take it easy on town planners who are juggling much. And need to sort of address needs around clean water versus housing, property insurance premiums that are high, lead paint programs, roof repair programs, manufactured housing accepted, getting those things accepted, grants for development and CPA match funds, more support for small developers, more targeted assistance for small communities. Lots of great ideas for us to be thinking about as policy solutions here at CHAPA. So thank you for those ideas and keep them coming. All right, so I'm gonna go to the last question, and then I wanna give enough time for you guys to get into the meat on all of this during the breakout sessions. What funding sources would you like to see CHAPA pursue? I think some of that was addressed in just the previous question as well, but particularly what funding, what budgetary priority should we be considering that you would like for CHAPA to pursue? 88 programs, transfer fee, infrastructure for water, wastewater, energy efficiency, transfer fee, I'm seeing that every time, housing co-ops, lots of plus ones on the transfer fee, energy efficiency, the HERO bill, closing gaps. I didn't get that full piece, but I would have it captured here. MBTA, housing for seniors, disabled individuals, the pre-development resources. Okay, septic and infrastructure funding, septic for ADUs, housing co-ops we're seeing several times, reducing the cost for wastewater, rehab money, funding for small and multifamily projects in rural communities. Okay, lots of ideas, keep them coming. We'll keep the poll live. Lots of ideas for things we can pursue. And now is our time to be putting together our budgetary priorities so that we can be bringing them forward at the state level. So thank you for all of those ideas. All right, so now that you've got all your juices flowing with all of the ideas around how what the barriers are, what the gaps are, what we can be tackling together, we're going to now send you off into your breakout rooms. And so I'm going to be joined by my colleague here, Jordan Stocker, who is going to start off our breakout rooms, and you'll be able to self-select which region you want to join based on where you live or work. One note I just wanted to make on the South Coast, you'll note that it'll say in parentheses the Southeastern Mass. So this would include all towns and cities in Bristol and Plymouth County and the South Coast. So just so there's no confusion, we'll start the breakout rooms now and have you self-select. We have a facilitator who is going to be a member of either CHAPA or one of our co-sponsors who will join you in the conversation. And you'll be having some guided questions, which we'll throw in the chat in just a minute to guide the conversation, but really want to hear from all of you. And Jordan, any other notes for folks as we send folks off?
No, I think you covered it, but if anyone does have issues, I'm just going to be hanging out in this main room here. So let me know if you have any issues connecting or just any questions, anything like that. I'll be here.
Welcome back.
Thank you.
Welcome back. It's great seeing all of your faces rejoining us back into the space. Hopefully you had some time to get into the conversation. I know it always feels like it's never enough time, especially as the conversation becomes so engaging. I do want to have some time for takeaways. I'll look to our facilitators to share maybe one or two notes from your region. If you could raise your virtual hand, I will call on you and just have you all share quickly some key highlights you shared in your session. Do you guys want to start? Our in-person folks in Greater Boston would love to hear what you guys maybe talked about. I know we're short on time here, but would love to have you share. And feel free if you want to pop it in the chat as well, I can uplift it. while we wait for them, Maritza, do you want to jump in, please?
Sure. I actually had the Greater Boston virtual group, so kind of back to back on that. We had a really great conversation. I wish we could have gone even longer, really uplifting issues that homeowners are seeing as it relates to repairs that they have to make, talking about some changes that the group would like to see in RAFT, possibly some working groups that CHAPA can create or be a part of, things like tracking ADUs that become available because of the state's new law. And also talking about uplifting tenant groups as it relates to TOPA and really preparing those groups for when opportunities arise so that they can take advantage of them. Thank you, everyone in my group.
Thanks, Maritza. Rachel, please.
I got to work with the wonderful Western Mass group, and I feel like we barely scratched the surface, but some of the issues that came up were related to public housing and the conditions of it, but also the treatment of residents and really supporting more of the tenant organizations in being able to organize and do their advocacy and work. Technical assistance for accessory dwelling units, and especially when there are septic systems or need for more infrastructure, money for home repairs, for home ownership, funding, the need for more of the state funding, the need for funding for more smaller scale development, but just an overall need for more funding.
Amanda, and then Eileen, please.
Yeah, I got to work with the Metro West group. We had a great discussion, and to echo what Rachel just said, not just funding, but actual cash to support the projects themselves. Cash is what is really needed. But also we talked a lot about how advocacy and education at the state level, or to bring it down so that advocacy and education doesn't have to happen so much at the local level, that there's just not necessarily the resources and ability to handle the amount of advocacy and work and education that needs to happen, and that things like MEI are an incredible start, but how do we continue to really ramp that up so that we can kind of continue that trend. And we also talked about the need for more consistent tracking of ADUs. That came up. Yeah, and also consistency in terms of applying for multiple affordable housing lotteries and filling out the same information over and over again from one project to the next. How can we streamline that more?
Eileen, please.
Okay, I'll talk quickly. So challenges related to scale, whether it's funding gaps, whether it's the source of the funding does not work well for smaller areas like the Berkshires, where we've got small towns trying to make something work. So scale type issues. Preservation. We really want to elevate that, not just the aging homeownership stock, which needs help, but our aging portfolios of affordable housing. And there are very few resources. It's challenging to re-syndicate affordable housing deals. And then two other quick ones. Of course, we are not part of the MBTA. What is the equivalent for us? Affordability is not, we don't factor in transportation directly when we're calculating affordability, and the people in the Berkshires are spending close to 30% on their transportation. So when you add that to housing, it does not leave a lot of room for anything else. So rural solutions to transportation. And then lastly, municipal capacity and technical assistance. We know regional planning does this, but there's such a deep need. Every community is trying to figure out housing, and how do we provide that level of support and make that happen. Thank you.
Thanks, Eileen, and thank you for those who were able to continue to stay with us. I want to give Josh and Maureen an opportunity to uplift as well. I want to hear what you guys talked about in your breakout rooms, please.
Sure, I'll go super quick. We talked about accessibility in units and affordability in those accessible units, the development of housing that is accessible first and foremost, also talked about zoning and community development changes in communities that are really, having positive effects. One of the other things we talked about was the permitting process for things like ADUs, or the permitting process is really onerous for small, single homeowners for adding one single unit compared to, large developers with staff going through that permitting process. And then continue to talk about, fair housing and other works, other work like that. So.
Thanks, Josh. Maureen, and then we have our friends in person in Greater Boston.
I'm going to kick it over to Amanda Glennon, who is keeping track of all the notes in our group, who's had technical difficulties. There she is.
So one of the things that we discussed was how to bring regional issues to the state more effectively. And one of the things was making sure that there is different perception and understanding of housing needs in the South Shore area. People don't necessarily understand what's going on down here, so the resources may be misaligned, and making sure that the South Shore gets the same opportunity as larger places like Boston. Making sure that the community is invited to accessible community forums so that they can get the information about these policy updates. And it would be great to have CHAPA support for certain legislative tactics that are not necessarily housing direct, but housing related, to get support there, and looking into opportunities for unused state or federally owned land that could potentially be used for housing, and restoring abandoned or unused or underused buildings.
Thanks, Amanda and Maureen. Please, Greater Boston in person.
Maybe you can see me.
Well, we can see you, yeah.
Great. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much, everyone who contributed to our discussion. We covered a lot, which I won't be able to all summarize now, but a couple of things we covered is how difficult it is to find a single room in a larger apartment if you're unable to afford your own one bedroom, and ways we can make that easier for folks to find. One term I really liked, someone mentioned the need for housing doulas who can really just help folks through the entire process of finding housing. Related to that, we discussed how it's actually very hard for many folks to stay in the affordable housing field because the salaries they receive aren't high enough to afford housing. So that's kind of a broader issue we need to tackle. We also talked about the need to continue breaking down zoning barriers to create multifamily housing in the suburbs and elsewhere. We talked about how to make sure folks are in apartments that are appropriately sized for them, so that empty nesters aren't in apartments that are too big, and that folks who have really large families can find housing with enough bedrooms. And we also talked about the need to continue providing in-person resources to folks post-COVID when so much of our work is online. So thanks to everyone who contributed to that.
Yeah. Thanks, Will. Anne, and then Ashley, please.
Sure thing. Thank you. This is for the Cape and Islands region, and we talked about the seasonal communities designation and our lack of funding, how towns locally are having difficulty releasing RFPs because of all the technical aspects that they need and help that they need. There's some buying down of market rate homes that's happening, which is really helpful, serving higher income brackets up to 240 AMI, but also 120 AMI. There's redevelopment of existing units and mixed use units, balancing wastewater and cleaning up water with adding units, difficulty reaching minority populations. There's the same people doing the work, and organizing communities and different towns together so that we can all be behind, towing the line in the same direction. So thank you.
Thanks, Anne. Ashley, and then our friends in Springfield.
Hi, Ashley from North Shore Community Development Coalition. We talked about a lot of similar things that were discussed throughout, but the last thing that came up that I wanted to co-sign was rent control in Massachusetts is something that we should be considering. A theme that's come up in our region is that our AMI is connected to the greater Boston region. And so where our communities or the cities that are located, our AMI is much lower than those. So the rents are too high for the residents who are looking in those. Some of the other things we're discussing, funding for ADUs, to to make those affordable, but then to think about some of the regulations around ADUs, because you know, with fair housing law, you can't discriminate, but it may prevent people from building ADUs if like friends or people that you know don't have access to those units. Some other discussions were just around some fair housing issues with relationships between like public housing management and tenants who are like the commissioners of their groups that are experiencing you know, racism and other things like that. So those were a couple of the things that had come up in our group.
Thanks, Ashley. And our in-person friends in Springfield.
Hello.
Wayfinders. Yes. Hi, Keith.
Hi. So we there's a number of things that were already mentioned that I'm not going to underscore first, but I wanted to talk about some of the housing types that I haven't heard mentioned that we talked about. We talked about the need to support our mobile home and manufactured home communities, where there's kind of a gap in terms of the ability to maintain those communities and support people in financing repair and improvements. We talked about the need for community scale or missing middle housing, and that there is not funding that's adequate or that's sized and appropriate for those projects, and how we have many of them in different scales of community here, both rural, urban, suburban, that would make a big difference in our region. We did talk about capacity as well, both at the city and town level, as well as the need to build greater capacity among entities within the state government to work with cities and towns in our region, and to work more quickly to get resources and actions done so that we can move more forward more quickly, and also more capacity from CHAPA to come out and work with our municipal engagement team here in our region. We have lots of cities and towns who are energized by all the discussions around the Affordable Homes Act and people who want to do things, but need a lot of support to advance those things. And then we talked about the need for local resources. So the local option transfer fee was something that we know would need to be tweaked to work here in Western Massachusetts, but the need for another resource that localities can put forward. We don't have a big aggregating entity like the city of Boston can aggregate resources for down payment assistance and for production. We need to be able to scale things up here as well, and figure out how to be able to do that. And then I think I'll leave it right there for now.
Thanks so much, Keith. We are taking active notes and getting all of these things down that you all are sharing. Thank you for those who've been able to stay a few extra minutes with us. I think it's important that we have these sessions and maybe more time for the breakout sessions and discussion, but we hope you'll continue to engage with us with our committee work. We have several events popping up. David has shared in the chat our Tools for Production conference. I definitely want to plug. Our 3-series virtual sessions will be talking about some of these different tools and housing challenges that we can be working on to put in our toolbox to address issues around production. So we'll invite you to join us for that. Thank you all to our co-sponsors, certainly our sponsors, and for all the work getting the word out here. Certainly our co-sponsors who have helped us put together in-person sessions in Greater Boston. So thank you to Metro Housing and in Springfield. So thank you to Wayfinders. We're excited for this year's session and looking forward to both allowing this video to be accessible to you on the events page and all of the comprehensive notes of what we've learned and put together. So I also want to thank the MEI team, the Municipal Engagements team, Lily, Will, Sade, and Monica, and the policy team, Jordan and Matt, for helping put together this session, and of course our full CHAPA staff that have been supported. Thank you all so much, and until next year, but also we hope in the meantime you'll join us in our ongoing committee work throughout the year. So thanks again, everyone.